What are some of the differences in the contract? I mean, I think that what's interesting is how somebody's presenting themselves versus how their contract plays out, right? Because those are two different things. You can represent yourself a certain way, and then your contract can mean something different. And so I think breaking through those things, I think in our industry, most of the time when I'm talking to prospects or really in that scratch environment, right? Back to that. And even tenured agents who just don't really understand the network world, they're looking at everything as the same. They really think everybody's an aggregator and that everything's just a complete aggregation play. What they don't understand is, and I point this out a lot, when we define in our contract that you own the direct contract, one of the ways that I utilize to differentiate that as an example is that we have monthly fees, right? Most other groups have some type of monthly fee and it's a flat rate. And the reason why it's a flat rate is because they have also a commission split. So there's a commission split on all the business and they're always going to have a commission split, whether that's 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, whatever it is. We only have that in our MGA because once you get a direct contract, you're paid directly.
Yeah.
And so how you can really understand ownership and whether you have ownership is, are you getting paid through XYZ MGA or is the carrier actually paying you directly? And I think that's the differentiating question that helps them start to define, okay, what does this mean? And the next question is, how do you define ownership? And that's what I've really started asking people because there are a lot of people that are happy in that sub-producer world, which is the truth. Because
less headache.
They're a wantrepreneur is really what I call it. Okay.
Wow.
I have access to carriers. I'm running a business. I have an LLC. I'm running a business, right? Because I'm controlling my time. I'm controlling my destiny through commissions. But what they don't understand about that piece is they're not building any type of equity. All they're doing is building some type of revenue machine that's dependent on those carrier relationships staying in place. So the question is, do you want to be a producer and run 3 other businesses and you're happy with just getting your cut and you don't actually have to deal with all the politics of your contracts? Or do you really want to build something substantial that you can get a great multiple for in the future and you get to actually manage those carrier contracts?
Right. I've heard solopreneur and wantrepreneur. But real quick, because there is one other distinction that you can track to further Jessica's point. Which is when the policy goes to the insured, whose name is on the paper. If it's your agency, ABC company, that denotes contract ownership. If it's different, if it says, well, I won't disparage anybody, but let's just say XYZ MGA, that denotes who owns that.
Right. Going back to first solopreneur versus entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'm hearing all sorts of.
I prefer solopreneur because I'm not trying to disparage anybody.
You want to be on your own?
Sounds bad. No, I think entrepreneur. We're all wanting to get where we need.
You're feeling a positive spin.
All right, so we're gonna put a big disclaimer on the intro for this. We do not mean to offend anybody.
Yeah.
What
do you mean I'm not an entrepreneur?
All right.
We're all wanting. We're entrepreneuring our way through.
I would refer to that as a captive light model. So in other words, you have the independence to grow and build your spikedom, but at the end result, you are building it for
somebody else.
Well, and I say entrepreneur, and yeah, it's pretty direct, okay? Which we know I can be pretty direct anyways.
Which is great.
But here's the reality of it, and you know this, Chad, because you coach us and walk through it, and Chris, there's a different level when you have the business acumen to really decide what you're building, right? And so I think
it's a different level of because we were talking about this at lunch. It's a different level. And we were actually talking about spouses. And when you have a spouse that's completely, or even a child that's completely 100% dependent on you, it changes everything. So as an owner, when everybody's livelihood is 100% dependent on you and what it is, the decisions that you make, it has a tendency to change your actions to make certain, ideally, if you're an ethically strong person, to take care of them.
Yeah, I'd say it should.
Well, okay. It should
change.
Good point. Yeah.
Because if I make a decision that's going to hurt my staff or hurt my closest circle, I don't want to work with people like that. But B, I have a real, that's a real gut check because
Yeah.
I don't mean to spin the podcast a different direction.
No, well,
That's
you
an
take
ethics thing.
responsibility for it because it's
Yeah.
the type of business owner that you are and who you want to be, and you continue to develop and push yourself to be that. And I think that's the point, is that you have to push yourself in those decisions all the time because those decisions never stop.
and that's the balance whenever we're looking at relationships and contracts, right? Contracts, great saying, contracts are written in the best of times for the worst of times,
There you go.
right?
There's his quote for the day. He doesn't get another one.
There's
Just
my
kidding.
quote for the day. But really, right? So I mean, we come into a contractual agreement when everything
intentions.
is
Yeah.
perfect, beautiful, we're excited, new, right?
Yeah.
So the contract that lays out what happens when things aren't,
Mm-hmm.
or when one party decides, hey, it's time to get out.
Yep.
Right? Because it just doesn't work. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're looking at the contracts from that lens, right?
Mhm.
What does this contract do for me right now today? What does it do for me 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah.
And if it's written appropriately, it takes care of everybody all the way around.
Yeah.
Great point.
To that point, you're causing me to think about from the agency at the scratch startup. There are all networks have some intrinsic value that or benefit that you may not recognize as you're building. So we kind of refer to it as you're coming underneath our shelter or coming
Mhm.
into our ecosystem. That when I make that statement of you're stepping into our ecosystem, there's a lot of pluses to our ecosystem that you as the
Absolutely.
person that coming into may not be aware of, such as reduction in thresholds, such as increased in commission, to where if you make the decision to leave out from underneath that umbrella or out of that ecosystem, you're going to find out what it's like to truly be on your own. And those are things that you really want to contemplate. Now, we'll advise that with our clients that are leaving and say, hey, FYI, you need to go through and check with these contracts because your threshold right now, you're only writing X amount. As soon as you roll out, you're going to have to build or double that because otherwise they're going to look at you differently. Just to be aware of that,
Mhm.
because that's one of our biggest tenets is we don't want people to be unaware of it's the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
We want them to be fully aware of what that means. So, I mean, you now have 10 contracts. Can you really thrive with 10 contracts outside of that network ecosystem? Sorry, that was just a strong distinction.
Well, no, that's actually a really good distinction. But more importantly, it also kind of drives into the next question, and that's when it comes time for that contract. Let's say you want to acquire somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because we talked heavily about the acquisitions in the last podcast. What part do their current contracts play in that process? I mean,
Good question.
sometimes could it be a deal breaker? How do they transfer over?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And kind of what are you seeing, you know, on your side with
Mhm.
people coming
Mhm.
trying to get out of contracts or enter into new contracts, right? On that acquisition.
What
piece.
if I only own the data?
Well, I think that's the thing right there. And I think this actually ties back into what you were just talking about with contracts, Chad, when you talked about they're built for the best of times. They're written in the best of times for the worst of times.
Yes.
Well, and I think going back even one step further, may I say, on the entrepreneur, which I'm going to wrap
You're
this up
doubling
because
down on that.
because it actually is positive. And here's what I mean to say on that. Here's what I mean to say. Number one, we all build. Okay. And so one
What
of
do
the
you
things
really mean?
one of the things I've learned in my time is that there have been mentors along the way that tell you and show you the things that you just don't know, right? And so I think oftentimes what drives an entrepreneur or entrepreneur that I have deep respect for anybody jumping off the diving board is their ability to act, their ability to take risk, right? And so what they aren't always doing is thinking about the worst of times because that can inhibit their ability to want to take a risk. So most of the time those people can be the people that are less risk adverse, right? And so they may not, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but it's not always forecasting, hey, I'm looking at selling this in 10 years. It's I need to build this business now and I need to generate income for my family. So I'm concerned about what I can get today versus sitting down and having somebody that can mentor them through what are you going to do once you build to 500,000 in premium? And what are you going to do once you build to 4 million in premium? And if you want to acquire something one day, what does that look like, right? And I think that also goes into carrier codes because I think oftentimes what we often see is that we bring on new agencies And I was talking to one of our growth coaches about this today, and they go into this like direct appointment haze. They're just like, give me whatever direct appointment I can get. I want all the direct appointments because that is what's going to make me build my
It's
business.
kid in the candy store.
It's not, oh, I got to get all these people to actually quote. And, oh, yeah, I just came from a captive model where I built this whole agency on one contract, but now I need 50. But what they're not always thinking about is managing those contracts, to your point, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that our network ecosystem, your great verbiage there, Chris, brings is that we have people like growth coaches that help work with maintaining codes. But one of the things we often see in acquisitions is that there are poorly maintained codes where they're on the edge of termination. And so those are not going to be able to move in an acquisition. So even though that buyer is sitting there looking at the revenue that is coming from this agency, the reality is when if that contract goes away and doesn't move to you, is that revenue going to be able to be remarketed, and where do you put it at that point? And I think that is something that a lot of people that look at buying businesses, they don't know that that's due diligence they need to do to look at the good standing on the code. And they buy something and now they're set up with a heap of trouble because there may not be a market to put that.
Or they buy something and realize, I can't even take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we see that
huge.
A lot of the time, specifically with other networks. That's why, again, I like the captive light or captive model, because when you don't own the contracts, your rights to sell that book of business may be extremely limited, and you may have to sell it to an approved buyer. What does that mean? Who approves it? Or, hey, you can sell this, but the buyer has to become a member of this company in order to move forward. You came back from Farmers. That's how they have it. Farmers says
might
we'll
be
sell the book.
working with people right now that are doing that.
Well, right. And so when you identify that, that's often one of the things that will stall an evaluation or stall a business from selling. So being able to, on the front end, and quite frankly, a lot of the companies that are going to have those provisions have them in there because they want to have that transparency. They want to have that conversation. I've seen so many producers, so many perceived agency owners, the entrepreneur, that go out and sell the book and then realize it was not their right to sell the book. And then they end up getting sued. And they usually lose that lawsuit because they do not have the ownership. And they're like, well, no, I own all of it. It's like, no, you don't. You may own the client data. You do not own the contracts.